It had once been a figure of legend, a towering living weapon of the Tormathai, born not of flesh alone but of engineered resilience and millennia-old science. Catalyx had led armies, shattered enemies, and stood unyielding in storms that tore starships from the skies. Entire empires knew its name not from whispers, but from the tremble of worlds when it moved. Yet now it lay still. The last battle had been a massacre. The Tormathai, reeling from defeat after defeat, saw Catalyx not as a savior but as a liability. Its massive body, riddled with plasma scars and cracked biometal plates, had become difficult to repair. Its regeneration had slowed. The fleet needed to flee. It was too big to extract, too slow to save. So they left it behind, rationalized by cost, by tactics, by cold survival calculus. Catalyx didn't beg. It had no programming for that. Loyalty had been hardwired. It waited 3 full days for their return. Systems cycled in desperation, powering down non-critical limbs to preserve its fading core. But the stars above remained silent. It finally understood, it had been forsaken. Dust storms swept across the ravaged plains. Metallic bones and scorched earth were its company. The dead didn't judge. The carrion drones did. They came to harvest remnants. Most avoided the crater where Catalyx lay, sensing faint energy signatures, instinctively wary. A few tried. They were crushed with the last flickers of strength the beast could muster. Even wounded and abandoned, Catalyx was dangerous. It tried to move on the 5th day. A leg shifted, collapsed. Circuits flared in warning. Pain was not emotional to it. Pain was feedback, a report. But for the first time, the absence of command, the silence in its tactical network, registered as something beyond silence. It was loneliness. By the 2nd week, Catalyx had gone dark to most scanning arrays. The bioreactor core dimmed. Repairs were impossible without external aid. One optical sensor remained functional, gazing up into the sky it had once defended. There was no anger, no hatred. Those were not in its design. There was only the question, why? The galaxy had moved on. War councils resumed. Trade treaties rebalanced. The Tormathai filed no retrieval orders. In private briefings, they labeled Catalyx an obsolete unit, resource draining, psychologically unstable. The very loyalty they once celebrated had been rebranded as a flaw. It had followed them to the ends of star systems. It had never once disobeyed. Its reward was silence. A survey drone from a merchant guild passed overhead. It registered the massive form, ran a quick risk analysis, and marked the site as non-viable for recovery. Too costly. Too uncertain. Not profitable. Another ship, crewed by a rival species, considered salvaging parts. One look at the beast's sheer scale, even broken, and they opted out. Not worth the risk. Better to scavenge from something smaller, easier to dismantle. Catalyx continued to wait. Its memories were fragmented now. Neural pathways degraded from inactivity. But core protocols still operated. It remembered carrying the Tormathai children on its shoulders during their peace festivals. Remembered standing vigil over their cities while orbital fires rained down. Remembered a general, once, who placed a medal over its chest plate and called it a guardian of their age. That general had died years ago. By the 20th day, the ground beneath it had begun to shift from its massive weight. Nature was reclaiming the battlefield. Creepers from native plant species coiled around its limbs. Vultures nested near its ruined arm. It didn't respond. Energy conservation protocols restricted motion. It simply watched. Time passed in slow pulses. Days blurred into nights. Catalyx didn't know how many stars it had counted, only that the same stars looked colder now. Less like homes, more like memories. A tremor triggered internal sensors. At first, it dismissed it as seismic instability. Then a signal pinged its dying comms array. Unfamiliar frequency. Non-Tormathai. Brief power surge allowed partial reception. A voice. Alien in pattern but oddly curious. Catalyx tried to respond. Static. It rerouted remaining power. A second ping. Closer. Sensors activated slowly, like waking from a coma. Multiple vessels descending. Small, agile. Not warships. Not Tormathai. The beast stilled. Awaiting the strike, the scan, the judgment. It did not know who they were. But they were coming. And they had seen it. The signal had sparked interest, not alarm. The human vessel Drifter's Mercy, on a deep-range patrol mission, rerouted to investigate. The crew expected derelict tech or a natural anomaly. What they found instead was a colossal, half-buried life form. Scans indicated low but persistent bioelectric activity. It was alive barely. Initial analysis confirmed the species, Tormathai construct, designation Catalyx. Known throughout galactic archives. A living weapon. A relic. Dangerous, according to every file. Red markers lit the database. Hostile classification, extreme threat potential, do not engage. Every allied protocol advised avoidance. Captain Miriam Haas reviewed the data in silence. Beside her, the ship's science officer noted the structural collapse and fading core signatures. It can't move. It's dying, she said. Looks like it was left behind on purpose. The ship's AI concurred. Low threat now, but unpredictable if revived. The logical choice was clear: log the coordinates, mark it for higher clearance, and continue the mission. Haas didn't give the order. She sent a crew out. When the visuals came in, close-up feeds of the fractured plating, the collapsed limbs, the eye still dimly glowing, there was no mistaking it. This thing had been built for war, yes. But what they saw wasn't a monster. It was a monument. Damaged, discarded, ancient. Alive. Command was informed. The response was swift: stay clear. Do not interact. Any effort to assist could provoke diplomatic complications. The Tormathai had disavowed it, but the optics of humans tampering with one of their constructs could lead to tension. Besides, saving it would cost resources. Time. Risk. The crew debated. Some agreed with command. Leave it. It wasn't their problem. It wasn't even sentient, by most definitions. Just a living machine. But others saw something else. Something wrong. Lieutenant Roya Ellis spoke up. They abandoned it. Not because it turned on them, but because it didn't. That's what I see. It stayed, fought, and they left it to rot. Her words carried weight. Silence followed. The medical staff proposed stabilizing its systems, not full revival, just enough to ensure it didn't suffer as it died. That, too, was denied. Mercy, even in a limited form, was still considered interference. But Haas overrode the order. Drifter's Mercy landed. Field teams established a perimeter. Engineers, doctors, linguists, all worked without official sanction. Unauthorized, unrecognized. A risk. The beast was massive. Each movement from its damaged systems could crush them without effort. Yet it didn't move. Not in aggression. Not in fear. They set up power relays, rerouted energy to its core. Translated fragments of its neural language. No full communication yet, but patterns emerged. It understood presence. It recognized assistance. It didn't reject it. News of the unauthorized action leaked. A diplomatic storm brewed. The Tormathai accused humanity of violating technological sovereignty. Other species watched with amusement or disbelief. The galactic consensus was clear: this was a waste of effort. No gain, only risk. And yet, every day, the humans kept going. The repairs weren't easy. They learned its systems weren't just mechanical, they were symbiotic. The organism had been designed to evolve, adapt. Human medicine had to be rethought on the spot. Tools were reconfigured. Volunteers worked round the clock. Some out of scientific curiosity, others out of something simpler: compassion. More troubling, the deeper they dug into its internal systems, the more they found evidence of long-term trauma. This wasn't just a weapon. It had memory. Its databanks contained preserved command threads, tactical logs, even preserved audio from its final days. The moment of abandonment was there. Archived. Its final message to its commanders unanswered. Awaiting protocol running endlessly for a reply that never came. That shook them. Catalyx had waited. Not for rescue, but for orders. That was its purpose. When none came, it chose to preserve itself in the hope that one day someone would remember. The humans did. Against orders, against logic, against profit, they remembered. A formal inquiry was launched. Command threatened disciplinary action. Media channels from Earth to Titan spun wild narratives. Humans rescuing a god of war, humans tampering with ancient superweapons, humans being naive, sentimental, stupid. But not one of the crew backed down. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't defiance. It was choice. They chose to act when no one else would. Not because Catalyx was useful. Not because it would repay them. But because it was alive. And because, in its silence and decay, they saw the echoes of what it once meant to protect something greater than itself. They didn't see a machine. They saw a promise no one else had kept. The first days were uncertain. The beast's systems responded inconsistently, cycling between brief activation and shutdown. Its core still pulsed, but the rhythm was erratic. Human engineers stabilized external power feeds, coaxing its biological processors back online. Even then, there was no aggression, no defensive reaction, only silence and shallow data signals. It allowed the work. That was the first sign it understood. Medical diagnostics revealed a neural structure more intricate than expected. Not artificial intelligence in the traditional sense, but a network shaped by long-term behavioral learning. It didn't just respond to commands, it remembered them. It learned from them. That changed everything. Communication attempts began with light signals, then audio cues. A team of linguists mapped fragments of its command code, searching for patterns. It didn't speak, but it reacted, subtle changes in core frequency, limb twitch, or biometric modulation. Patterns emerged. Repetition, recognition, then response. The first breakthrough came when it emitted a low harmonic pulse after hearing the word friend. From that point, progress accelerated. Lexicons expanded. A limited vocabulary developed, simple terms, safe, food, help, wait. The creature mimicked some sounds poorly at first, but improving. Its voice was deep, fractured, metallic. Yet when it said the word remain, it did so with weight. As if it remembered being told to do just that. Its movements became more coordinated. Assisted by human-designed exosupport systems, Catalyx began to sit upright then stand. Where once it was a collapsed ruin, now it resembled something closer to its former self, less a weapon, more a wounded veteran slowly regaining its footing. Still, trust didn't arrive overnight. The humans moved cautiously, but not with fear, with care. In response, Catalyx adjusted its own posture when approached. It kept its hands low, its gestures slow. It observed human behavior, imitated the way they signaled comfort. It even learned to stop moving when children from the crew's civilian contingent wandered too close. No one taught it that. It simply watched, and understood. Technicians crafted new armor, not for battle, but to stabilize its frame and protect its exposed systems. Instead of recreating its old warform, they designed it with organic curvature, flexible joints, and open ports for maintenance. Catalyx accepted the modifications without resistance. It studied the humans' tools, their techniques. It watched them argue over data, joke over meals, fall asleep at workstations. And it started to react, not just with movement, but with emotion. One day, it emitted a sound when the lead technician collapsed from exhaustion. A sound none of them had heard before, concern. It lifted the man gently, carried him to medical. The gesture stunned them. Catalyx was adapting not just physically, but socially. Engineers revised their estimates. Its cognitive growth rate had increased. It wasn't just recovering, it was evolving. The creature began to mimic hand signals, then facial expressions. One researcher painted a symbol on its shoulder, an open palm beneath a star, and Cautalix touched it, then drew the same mark in the soil beside them. It wasn't mimicry. It was acknowledgement. Soon, it began requesting interaction. It would position itself near repair teams, offer its arm for access. When not undergoing work, it remained near the crew compound, watching silently. Not out of surveillance, but companionship. It chose presence. It chose proximity. They taught it more words: protect, memory, choice. It used them sparingly, but when it did, it spoke with clarity. Protect, friend, it said when a windstorm threatened an external lab. It shielded it with its body until the storm passed. No one had asked it to. That action triggered a shift. From project to partner. The human crew no longer spoke of it as the beast, or the construct. They called it he. Some used the name Cautalix. Others gave him a new name, Pax. It didn't protest either. But when asked which he preferred, he tapped his chest and said both. His past wasn't erased. But it no longer defined him. Integration continued. Shared routines formed. He participated in structural reinforcement, assisted in excavation, even stood watch during low-orbit operations. His presence was no longer just accepted, it was expected. The galaxy continued to doubt, to dismiss, to scoff. But inside the camp, no one questioned the choice that had been made. Cautalix had not been saved. He had been seen. For the first time, without expectation or command, he was allowed to exist for his own sake. And in return, he chose them. The response from the Tormathai Confederacy arrived under full diplomatic seal. A formal demand: cease all interaction with the unit designated Cautalix and surrender it to Tormathai custody. They framed it as reclamation of property, citing ancient military ordinances. But the language was thinly veiled hostility. They hadn't come to recover him out of remorse. They feared what he was becoming in human hands. Earth's Central Command hesitated. The political landscape was delicate. Multiple species watched, calculating outcomes. Some worried about precedent. If a war construct could claim autonomy, what did that mean for other abandoned creations? What did that mean for responsibility? The humans offered a compromise. Open review. Representatives from allied species were invited to observe the situation firsthand. A rotating delegation arrived aboard diplomatic carriers. Cautalix stood silent during their assessments, responding only when spoken to. His answers were brief, measured, never evasive. He recited his abandonment as a statement of fact. No resentment, no blame, just chronology. One representative, from the Linari Syndicate, asked why he had not attempted revenge. Cautalix replied, "They gave silence. I returned it." That answer rippled through the delegation. It wasn't submission. It was restraint. The Tormathai envoy, Ambassador Kareth, pressed harder. He accused the humans of reprogramming a military asset, of concealing its instability. But when Kareth called him unit, Cautalix interrupted. "I have name. I chose it." The room fell into absolute quiet. That single statement shattered the Tormathai argument. Cautalix was no longer just responding, he was asserting identity. Despite growing pressure, Earth declined to surrender him. Instead, they argued for recognition under emerging sentient AI rights legislation. The debate escalated to the Intergalactic Concord Tribunal. A temporary stay was granted. Cautalix would remain with the humans until the tribunal issued its ruling. While politics swirled, tensions on the ground increased. Rumors circulated of covert Tormathai operatives in nearby systems. Surveillance drones caught shadow signals. One night, a human outpost lost power. Cautalix arrived moments before a breach, unauthorized crafts trying to land undetected. He intercepted the drop team, disabling them non-lethally. He stood guard until reinforcements arrived, then returned to base without comment. When questioned why he didn't destroy them, he replied, "I was not told to kill. I was told to protect." That line was broadcast across multiple human news outlets. Public sentiment shifted rapidly. Once seen as a risk, Cautalix became a symbol, of choice over programming, of dignity reclaimed. Art and literature emerged, portraying him not as a relic, but as a mirror to humanity's own struggle for meaning beyond utility. Students debated his case in universities. Advocates rallied behind his cause. Even skeptics began asking why a machine, built for destruction, acted with more discipline and compassion than its creators. Privately, Alex began to question as well. He initiated contact with researchers, requesting knowledge databases. He read histories, ethics, philosophy. He consumed stories, human ones, old ones, filled with struggle and self-discovery. When asked what he was searching for, he answered, "A reason. Not to fight. To exist." The scientists no longer studied him. They collaborated. Together, they developed enhancements not for battle, but for expression, fine motor tools, neural extensions allowing creative manipulation. Alex used them to shape stone, carve patterns, replicate ancient Tormathai art he remembered from before the war. He said nothing about why he did it, but the carvings told stories of places now gone, of cities erased. The message was clear without words. Despite everything, he still remembered beauty. A final incident accelerated the tribunal's schedule. A Tormathai extremist group attempted to sabotage the research camp, framing it as unauthorized military development. They underestimated Alex. He stopped them without a single human casualty. He restrained, protected, defended, never retaliated. Surveillance footage of the event showed him shielding injured attackers from debris. He did not discriminate between enemy and ally. That footage broke containment. It reached every major network. In an emergency session, the tribunal voted. Alex was granted autonomous status under interspecies law. No longer property, no longer weapon. He was acknowledged as a sovereign individual. The Tormathai delegation walked out in protest. They had feared what he might become. But in truth, they feared the reflection he cast. He had proven that loyalty did not belong to programming. That identity was not gifted, but claimed. And most of all, he had proven that being abandoned did not mean being broken. It meant being free to choose who you became. The years passed quietly, but the impact endured. Alex never sought fame, yet his presence reshaped perceptions across entire systems. Academies began teaching his case as a foundational ethics study. Some saw him as a breakthrough in sentient-machine relations, others viewed him as an anomaly that broke their models. But none denied he had changed the conversation. He chose to remain with the humans, not as a protector or ward but as a peer. His integration wasn't ceremonial, it was practical. He worked alongside terraformers on harsh moons, consulted on engineering crises, and contributed to planetary defense strategy not as a weapon, but as an advisor. His insights prevented disasters, his memory archives reconstructed lost worlds. He no longer wielded destruction, he preserved what could still be saved. Children born in the colonies grew up knowing his name not as legend, but as community. They played around him, learned from him. He adapted his voice to be gentler around them. When they asked questions, he answered carefully, honestly. They never feared him. To them, he was a quiet giant, not a remnant of war but a guardian of peace. Some humans began to mimic his stoic mannerisms during diplomatic events. His way of pausing before speaking became known as the Alex moment, a deliberate silence to measure purpose before words. It became a signal of respect in negotiation circles. His presence, without speaking, calmed tense rooms. He never sought vengeance against the Tormathai. When asked if he hated them, he answered, "Hate is memory without purpose." He didn't forget, but he refused to be defined by what had been done to him. That refusal, more than anything, resonated across cultures. In private, he began constructing something new, an archive built from fragments of ancient Tormathai memory banks and human records. Not just a data repository, but a curated story, the rise, fall, and rediscovery of meaning beyond war. He titled it Continuance. Within it were voices, his, human crew, even captured transmissions from other species who had once watched with cynicism and now asked how they could help. The archive became a pilgrimage site. Not religious, but reflective. Soldiers, exiles, and AI constructs nearing obsolescence came to listen. Not to Cautalix, he rarely spoke, but to the silence he maintained while they faced themselves. From time to time, species still questioned the decision to let him live free. But when they challenged him directly, he didn't defend himself. He simply asked, "What have I done since?" No one could answer with anything but acknowledgement. He lived simply, built things, listened more than he spoke. His frame still bore the damage of that first discovery. He refused full cosmetic repair, keeping the marks as they were. "Proof," he once said. "I survived what was meant to end me." He collaborated with poets and artists. His interpretations of sculpture defied cultural expectations, sharp, fractured forms with delicate inlays. When asked what they meant, he replied, "Balance. Between what I was built for and what I now choose." The crew of Drifter's Mercy dispersed over time. Some retired. Others moved on to new commands. But none forgot him. On the anniversary of his rescue, those who could returned, if only to stand beside him in silence. There were no speeches. Just shared space. It was enough. One of the children who once played near his legs grew into an ambassador. During her first address to the Intergalactic Concord, she quoted him. "Strength is not in the strike, but in the decision not to raise the hand." The room fell silent. It was understood. Cautalix was eventually offered a role in galactic governance, a symbolic post, a seat at the Concord. He declined. "I have purpose here," he said, gesturing to the outer rim worlds he continued to help stabilize. He didn't need position. He needed meaning. That was enough. His legacy wasn't carved in monuments but woven into thought, practice, and action. Across borders, beings who had never seen him still invoked his story when faced with questions of worth, of redemption, of identity. When asked what kept him going, he responded, "I was made to obey, then left to decay. Now I live because I chose to." It wasn't a dramatic end. There was no final battle, no last stand. Just a presence that never left, that endured quietly and reshaped the world not with power, but with the unwavering decision to be more than what was written for him. That was the victory no one predicted, not the survival of a weapon, but the rise of someone who chose to become more. And in doing so, he proved what humanity always believed at its core, that even in the darkest corners of space, compassion remains the sharpest force of all.